Africa, with 53 countries and a population close to 1 billion, has been described as the continent most vulnerable to climate change. With over 70% of the population living in rural areas, reliant on direct rainfall for their survival, widespread poverty, population pressure, and unpreparedness further limit the capacity to adapt. In Kenya, as in much of Africa, though changing climate threats are visible, there remains uncertainty in many climate model predictions and specific questions that are of interest to different livelihood groups, referring to the start, length, and intensity of the rainy season or the change in the frequency and length of dry spells. These questions are difficult to answer, but probably more important to the sustainability and management of livelihood activities. From a comparison of several models, there is some agreement that average annual temperatures are predicted to rise, typically by 1 degree centigrade by 2020s and 4 degrees centigrade by 2100. It is also likely to become wetter in both rainy seasons. Historically, communities have naturally adapted to their environment and adjusted their livelihoods in line with the changing availability and accessibility of resources. It is this invaluable indigenous knowledge which is being supported in many new locally grounded initiatives. 70% of Kenya's land is classified as drylands. Rainfall is becoming increasingly sparse and unpredictable. Water and trees work hand in hand as key components in helping communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. Water tables, rainfall patterns, and soil stability are inextricably linked to Kenya's forests and trees, which provide valuable ecosystem services such as climate regulation, protection against floods, landslides, erosion, and water conservation. But with 5,000 hectares being depleted each year to provide firewood, agricultural land, and timber, the forests are at a huge threat. Experts say that a forest cover of 10% is required for a country to sustain life naturally. At present, Kenya's forest cover is less than 2%. Severe environmental consequences of this denudation are already being felt. Kenya's 5 main forests are known as its water towers. These forests are important water catchment areas for Kenya. Over 90% of the country's water comes from these forested mountains, and 70% of electrical power generation is derived from rivers that flow from these forests. Kenya's wildlife, its agriculture, its major rivers and lakes all depend on the continued existence of these water towers. The Mau complex is the largest remaining forest block in Eastern Africa and east of the Congo Basin forest. But at the start of the new millennium, some 7,000 hectares of forest were cleared here over the course of 3 years. To address these environmental challenges and raise awareness on this issue, I, Wangari Maathai, initiated the Greenbelt movement in 1977 to promote tree planting in water catchment areas, private farms, and public spaces to meet community needs and preserve local biological diversity. It is estimated that preventing forest loss, particularly in the tropics, combined with large-scale restoration of degraded forests, could contribute 10 to 25% of the greenhouse gas reductions needed over the next 50 years. Water is at the heart of climate change in Kenya, not only for agriculture and pastoralism, but also because 70% of Kenya's energy comes from the water-generated power from the reservoir on the Tana River. Supply is already failing demand, and power cuts are a regular feature of urban life. However, according to a recent UNEP and World Agroforestry Center report, Africa's rainfall is more than adequate to meet the needs of the current population several times over, and this could be harnessed using rainwater harvesting methods and appropriate agricultural practices. Declining resources in rural areas exacerbated by drought or flooding is predicted to encourage conflicts over remaining resources, as is already happening in areas of northern Kenya.
An example of diversification in Turkana is in Namurupoth, where water from a borehole pumped by solar power is now irrigating kitchen gardens and providing vegetables to its owners. The Tungu Kabiri community demonstrates how the use of micro hydropower can bring development to rural areas, where almost 200 households formed a commercial enterprise to operate a micro hydropower plant. This shows the potential of micro hydropower in effectively meeting the energy needs of remote and isolated off-grid communities. So, from the mountains to the rivers and lakes, all of life revolves around the successful management and sustainable use of water. As we have seen from the few projects we have highlighted here, there is potential to be optimistic about. The challenge is enormous, but there are many small yet effective steps in the right direction.